What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and it is my great honor to have back on the show once again 35 plus year US Government Whistleblower on Deep State and New World Order, MK Ultra mind control, and human trafficking survivor, published author, writer, and poet, podcaster, and podcast host of her own show, star of the acclaimed documentary Trance, Mind Control, Human Slavery, and Recovering the Nation, beloved life changer, and someone who has been referenced as an inspiration on this podcast countless times over the last few years by survivors, whistleblowers, and parents from all over the world, Cathy O'Brien. A little bit about Cathy if you're new here, and a little bit about what we will be talking about on today's episode. In the dim underbelly of America's most guarded secrets, where the CIA's MKUltra projects wove a deep web of unimaginable horror, one woman's soul refused to shatter. Cathy O'Brien, born on December 4th, 1957, into a world that should have cradled her innocence, was instead thrust into a nightmare engineered by the powerful. Sold by her own parents into the clandestine clutches of Project Monarch, Cathy became a pawn in a global game of manipulation. As a little girl, she endured ritualistic abuse, trauma-based programming, and exploitation at the highest echelons of power. A White House sex slave, an unwitting courier of state secrets, her fragmented psyche a battlefield for the elite's darkest appetites. World leaders, politicians, and shadowy operatives paraded through her fractured reality, imprinting horrors that twisted her mind into a maze of dissociated parts designed for obedience and oblivion. But fate, that fierce and unrelenting force, had other designs. On February 8, 1988, in a covert operation shrouded in whispers of treason and heroism, Cathy was rescued by hero Mark Phillips, a 25-year intelligence veteran turned whistleblower turned her soulmate. What followed was no fairy tale escape, however, but a journey of raw reclamation, years of grueling deprogramming that peeled back layers of deliberate amnesia to reveal the full monstrosity of Cathy's enslavement. Together, Cathy and Mark pursued justice through the halls of Congress, only to be stonewalled by the chilling refrain, "For reasons of national security." Undeterred, however, they transformed their pain into a beacon, co-authoring explosive exposés like Transformation of America and Access Denied for Reasons of National Security, shattering the silence on government-sanctioned human trafficking and mind control. In their other book, PTSD Time to Heal, a transformative workbook born from Cathy's own recovery, she offers step-by-step tools to confront the ghosts of war, abuse, and engineered fear, journaling prompts that unearth buried truths, visualization exercises that build neural fortresses, and affirmations that reclaim free will as the ultimate rebellion. Their words didn't just document atrocity, they ignited a global reckoning, empowering survivors to question the invisible chains binding humanity. Yet Cathy's true alchemy lies not in accusation, but in reclamation. She has devoted over 3.5 decades to forging pathways out of the abyss. Cathy doesn't just speak, she mentors. Through her books and her podcasts, international lectures, and online communities, she has lifted countless survivors from the brink, teaching them to transmute their triggers into triumphs, fragmented memories into mended wholeness. The soul will always find a way to speak, she declares, her voice a thunderclap against the storm of silence. And now, in a crescendo of lyrical defiance, Cathy unveils reSOULutions, a collection of events and verses, her newest masterpiece, a poetic odyssey spanning 30-plus years of alchemical healing. Realized as a clarion call for our fractured era, this isn't a mere verse, it's a visceral map into the mind's emancipation. Penned in the quiet fury of recovery, its pages pulse with wordplay that dances on the edge of grief and grit. Elegies from stolen childhoods morph into anthems of planetary awakening. Raw vents of betrayal bloom into verses of unbreakable resilience. Themes of memory's aftermath, the soul's indomitable resistance, and the sacred fury of truth-telling weave through every line, urging readers to wield their pen as a sword against coercion. Free will begins in the mind, Cathy writes, and reSOULutions is the proof, a companion for anyone awakening in a world of cover-ups, where personal trauma mirrors collective chains. This book isn't read, it's practiced, reminding us that even in the echo of MK Ultra shadows, the human spirit authors its own dawn. And this is exactly what we will be talking about today in today's episode: healing and tools for coping with and managing trauma around the holidays. This time of year, while society joyfully celebrates yearly family traditions and festivities, many survivors face an unbearable silent trauma that is extremely debilitating and isolating. And Cathy is here today to offer hope, wisdom, and, in typical Cathy O'Brien fashion, practical tools and practices for healing and coping to help navigate trauma and to let all survivors know that you are not alone. Cathy is no mere victim. She's a hero, a living testament that the most profound resolutions begin from within. From the girl who was programmed to forget, she has become the woman who compels the world to remember and to heal. In her, we glimpse the infinite capacity of the soul to endure, to expose, and to empower. Her story isn't just awe-inspiring, it's a call to action, to reclaim your light and to become the love that you are. Because of Cathy, the trance is breaking, one reSOULution at a time. So you guys, please help me in welcoming back today's guest of honor, the woman who single-handedly, with the help of hero Mark Phillips, took on the deep state pedophile cabal while leading a movement proving that there is no depth to a mother's love and no trauma too deep to heal from. Survivor and survivor advocate, content creator, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, and an incredible woman I am so lucky to call a friend, the one, the only, Cathy O'Brien. Cathy, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Wow, what an intro. That was just so beautiful, Emma. You just said so much right there, and I am touched and honored. That is the sweetest intro, sweetest introduction ever.
You've written all these books, and I feel like I could just write a whole book just on you and how you've impacted the world. It's incredible. You know, there's no way to put it all into a brief intro, but you're deserving of every word, and the difference that you've made in this world is just so undeniable. The dozens and dozens of survivors on my podcast who have referenced you as an inspiration, people who say that they're alive today because of PTSD, time to heal. You know, it's just the impact that you've made. And I know that this has just been such a thankless journey in a lot of ways for you. You know, I'm so grateful that now we can hear the voices celebrate you, that the internet has brought us together and we can see the difference being made, that we can roll the snowball and introduce more people to these amazing healing tools that you've learned from your soulmate, Mark Phillips. And, you know, you can be able to help people reclaim their freedom of thought and create your own reSOULutions. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. Unfortunately, it's a really hard time of year for survivors, and it can be an extremely debilitating, painful, isolating time for them, especially when they see other families celebrating, when they see other families getting together, sort of oblivious to the dark underbelly of what you and others experience and know, and sort of the dark side of this time of year. And so I first of all just want to congratulate you on your new book, reSOULutions. I think that's such an incredible name. And I wanted to maybe talk about that first. I'd love for people to get it, you know, and to go support you. And wanted to just kind of ask you about it, ask you about the inspiration behind it and what people can expect whenever they purchase it.
Well, the reSOULutions is part of the healing journey. I'm creating a healing trilogy for survivors because, as you so well know, there are many survivors emerging right now. And that's why it's such an honor to hear what you have to say. And you speak so highly because you would know, you talk to all these survivors, they're coming out in such vast numbers now. And it's so deeply encouraging to see that happening. So I've got a trilogy of healing books coming out. PTSD Time to Heal, of course, which is the healing methods that Mark taught me. It's like a reminder to us all of our birthright to heal, the resiliency of body, mind, and spirit. It's within us all to heal. We can go within and heal. We don't have to look outside ourselves. That healing is possible. So that's so important. As I was healing, I had to deal and cope with the issues, you know, that I was having to face. And I found that keeping that pen to paper was a good way to help me cope with the reality of what I had been through. And that's how I started writing the poems. They wrote poetry um, the first year of healing and kept on going. And I would vent that way and take reframe the triggers, reframe the abuse that happened, and look for solutions, because Mark had taught me to voice no negatives without a solution. So I added solutions to the poems. I used the language of the subconscious that was used to manipulate me. I used it back on them to be able to show that I could heal in spite of it. So there's a lot of wordplay in reSOUlutions, but the poetry that I wrote kept going, and right up on through when 2017, when Mark passed away, when I lost my soulmate, my best friend, my hero, I wrote out the grief, because sometimes when we pick up a pen and paper and write out the grief, write out what we would have said, what we want to say now, to be able to express something like that helps us to move forward in life and realize fully that even in our darkest days of grief, that love lives, that all the beautiful things that Mark taught me were right there inside me. They're still right there. And all these things we shared, it's like all the horrible memories I had to deal with. Now my memories were beautiful memories of times that we had shared, accomplishments that we had had. So I vented those too. Survivors sometimes focus too much on the negative. There's other ways we've got to expand our thinking in order to be able to move forward and live the life that we're intended to live. Because the life we're intended to live is one of miracles and joy and synchronicity and possibility, not one of feeling beat down in victim mode all the time. So ultimately, that's what reSOUlutions offers. It also gives insight into triggers. We hear how the the survivors talk about their triggers as though it's something really bad. And it's not always bad. Sometimes it's a way into our subconscious mind. It gives us a view. When we consciously acknowledge those triggers, not only do we diffuse them, but we're able to understand why they are triggers to begin with and write that out, and all of a sudden we can access our own subconscious mind. That's something everyone everywhere needs to do, from every walk of life, whether they're survivors of trauma or just, coping in this traumatic world that we live in. It's something that we all can do. So I made collages. That's what Mark taught me to do. He handed me a stack of magazines and newspapers, and he told me to clip out anything that catches my attention, that gives me cause to pause, that really, really jolts me. So I kept a pen and paper nearby too, so that I could write out what was triggered by those images, so that I could write it out in full later. So I collected up all those images in box. And Mark told me later, he said, how you assemble those is like assembling pieces of your mind. And it will be a way of pulling your head together, being able to pull all those fragmented pieces of memory into a more comprehensive picture. So by 1990, 2 years after Mark had rescued my daughter Kelly and me out of the Washington, D.C. human trafficking swamp, I had those collages all assembled. I had poems in the works, and I did it throughout my healing process. So reSOUlutions is really a journey of that healing process that all survivors experience, and one that I'm confident they'll be able to relate to as they cope with the reality of their own abuse and transform it into the wisdom to be able to move forward through this this world that we live in, this complicated world that we live in. I've got a third book in this trilogy in the works right now. It's being prepared for publication. It's the one I'm most excited about, I think. It's aligned with the divine, and it's to remind us of the resiliency that we have within. Our brains have been made perfect. That means that we can heal fully, no matter what happens to us in life. Isn't who we are. Who we are is still within, and it's divinely protected, just waiting to be freed so that we can live life fully with full access to all that we experienced and use that for our own good. How many survivors, Emma, do you hear from that talk about being studied for heightened intuition and for clairvoyance or telepathy or remote viewing or, things like that? I assume you hear from a lot of survivors who speak that.
Hundreds.
Yeah. It's like when trauma occurs, it's like we get blasted into the primitive part of our brain, and that becomes, fully accessed again. And we get the heightened senses of vibrational frequency around us. And we can use all these things, all these added things that we gained towards our healing. Because when we use those intuitions, those heightened senses and everything else, it calms that overactive adrenal system. The trauma and the torture causes the adrenal system to be way overactive and jumpy and night terrors and, all that. Calms all that down when we activate and accept that back in. Too often, survivors are told that that's evil because they experienced it in their past. And it's nothing evil about it all. It's the perfection of our brains that we can use to further our healing path so that we can reclaim our joy, reclaim our innocence, reclaim that childhood that was taken away inside, that inner child, who we really are. At the core essence of our being is the purity that is aligned with the divine. Everyone everywhere seeks to re-tap into that childhood, that inner child, that innocence, that love, that joy. And it's right there. It's still there. And it's attached to the divine. It's right there. When we align with the divine within, we reclaim what was taken from us because they can't have it. They're low vibration, and these abusers can't touch that high vibration. It's ours. And then align with the divine is a journey. It tells little stories of the path to reclaiming that so that everyone can live their joy going forward.
And your books are heavily pirated and forged from other people. And so the place to get your book, I just showed the Amazon page. I'm going to show this again, but I'm also going to load Cathy's website, which is where I would recommend actually going to and clicking on her actual link. Because otherwise, if you go look online and try to find it, you're going to find versions of this that may not have been written by Cathy or maybe edited to not be her exact words. So you can go to her website, trance-formation.com. I'm going to have that in the show notes. Please go directly to her website. If you're looking to go on Amazon, you can access that. She also has signed books and holiday bundles for you guys, which would be a great gift for you, or if you have loved ones, or if you know a survivor, or if you know an advocate, a therapist. This is a really wonderful gift that you guys can do to both support Cathy and then to also help educate somebody who, might be interested in these topics. So did you want to add anything to that, Cathy?
I appreciate that. Yeah, when you slide down, you can see the different, I think if you slide down, I'm not sure, it should go to all the different signed copies that I sign myself and ship myself. I prepare those and write little notes. And I'm always so happy to be able to do it that way. And I've dropped the prices dramatically on those signed copies because the authenticity is real important. Because like you were saying, I've had so many books pirated now. All my books have been pirated and made free on the internet, and their information is altered. And the most important parts have been altered to promote the New World Order, to promote child sex trafficking, the things that I would never, but they change it and they alter it ever so slightly so that people become confused at what the message really is. So, not only is truth censored, it's diluted by misinformation. So yeah, we all need to be mindful of the information that we get and research it. Always research it, look further. Transformation of America was validated by clean members of law enforcement, intelligence, Secret Service. Every word in it was validated for Congress, and then national security was invoked on it. And still, I encourage everyone, research it further, because the more you research, the more you know, the more you see how absolutely inexcusable that we allow for the same handful of puppet masters to manipulate our brilliant minds and lives anymore. This is our time. This is our time to reclaim our free thought, free will, soul expression, to align with the divine within, live the love we are, reach out to each other, eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul, and govern ourselves. we don't need anybody to do it for us.
We don't, no. And you can get all of her books signed, like she said. Access Denied is now available with a signed copy, PTSD Time to Heal. And again, she has the book bundles up on top, along with her Trance movie as well. You guys can get right here on her website. I'm sure that's been pirated and edited as well from people. So I would really appreciate it if you guys just went right to Cathy's website, trance-formation.com, and get everything authenticized through her and find all of the actual material that's been created by Cathy or with the help of somebody else, such as with her documentary. So Cathy, thank you for sharing all of this. Thank you for all the books that you've made. I'm sure this wasn't easy doing some of these, especially your earlier books. This has to be kind of a fun journey, actually doing more of the PTSD Time to Heal type material, where it's a little more uplifting, a little more probably a little bit easier for you to put that pen in your hand and write about.
Yes, the solutions is what I've been all about all along. It was solutions that motivated me to start speaking out. Back in by 1990, my daughter Kelly had been medically kidnapped out of a hospital and taken into custody of the notoriously corrupted Child Protective Services. They did it very deliberately because she was high level and had remembered some very significant high level abusers that are named in Transformation of America. And so it was love for her, trying to raise awareness of her circumstance that compelled me to speak out to begin with. I didn't speak out of bitterness. I didn't speak out of obligation. I spoke out of pure love. And I think love is the most powerful force in the universe and the greatest motive we ever can use for speaking out. Fortunately for me, because I had healed from within myself and used the birthright healing methods that Mark reminded me that we all have, and I'd written out my memory, I couldn't be triggered. So from the very get-go, I already had aligned with the divine because of healing from within. That's what happens. When we align with the divine, we have a rudder. We evolve with the knowledge that's our defense against mind control. And we have this rudder that knows when we're being invaded, won't tolerate it, will stand strong. And so speaking out so early, I'm fortunate that I had healed from within, because in 1990, you can imagine how people responded to MK Ultra mind control, satanic ritual abuse, and child sex trafficking. That was so early on. So people weren't always kind. And it's a good thing I didn't need them to validate me. I didn't need any validation from anybody. I already knew my own truth, absolutely. What I needed was understanding for my daughter's situation. And that grew very rapidly. And as people started to embrace the information, they had their own point of reference because the system was so corrupted. Many more parents were experiencing that. People were noticing the children were being indoctrinated in the school system. They were being taught what to think instead of how to think. Writing by hand taken out of the school system because it activates the logic, critical analysis part of the brain where information's processed. They didn't want that processed. So they put the computers in, keyboards, the information doesn't process the same way. Plus, history had been rewritten. on the, computerized research. And that's a form of mind control, because mind control is a sliding scale from the kind of torturous robotic mind control I experienced to information control. Because we all formulate our thoughts, opinions, and ultimately our actions based on what we know. We need to know our knowledge base has been altered a long, long time, very deliberately. And we've been conditioned to look outside ourselves to big government, big pharma, big tech, big cult religion to tell us how to live our lives, when in fact we've been blessed with the wisdom all along. We have it all within us. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing we have within, that it accesses that strength of spirit that these perpetrators, these puppet masters at the top fear. Haven't been around them and their dark negative energy force, low vibration. I know their greatest fear is the strength of the human spirit and the infinite power of love. It's too high of a vibration. They can't reach it. They can't touch it. They can't get there. The only thing they can do is use mind control to keep us from thinking to access it, to keep us looking outside ourselves to them, to tell us how to live our lives instead of going within, remembering who we are and why we're here. And that knowledge base has been deliberately altered in the education system, in mental health, and in the medical community. The information that's in PTSD Time to Heal is information that Mark Phillips found buried under national security. It was deliberately kept from mental health and the medical community, because it's our birthright to healing. It's our resiliency. It's what the power of our mind over our bodies, the power of our mind over our lives, the brilliance that we've been blessed with, all that was omitted from education. And instead, therapists were misguided on how to help trauma survivors, telling them to have group therapy and talk about their trauma. Talking about it re-traumatizes in the brain. Writing it out opens neuron pathways, shifts it over to logic, and healing happens psychiatrically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, everything all at once. Talking about it, all it does is re-traumatize and traumatize everybody else around you. So they were telling them the wrong direction to go for healing, and then telling them that they needed to go confront their abusers and, forgive their abusers. And, this nonsense that so many survivors are still reporting that they've been told today, that they're supposed to do. Forgiving abusers is like condoning the abuse. That doesn't make sense. What we need to do is forgive ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for ever having complied with their wicked, nefarious ways. We need to forgive ourselves for not having stood up to them sooner. That's what we need to forgive ourselves for not being able to protect our own children from the abuse. So the forgiving of self comes with understanding. It comes with understanding mind control. It comes with understanding the components of it and the wickedness that's been imposed on us, and to understand that it's been generations of conditioning that have brought us to this point today. And when we understand that, we know that we've got a ways to go to re-educate ourselves, no matter who we are and where we've been. But especially survivors need to know that it's within them to heal themselves and to stop looking outside themselves for someone else to do it for them. That's the wrong direction.
And you're so right. And one of the things I want to sort of repeat what you said. Your message, if you listen to your very, very early interviews, you never did come out with rage and anger and coming out, with this message of sort of retaliation. It always has been love. You've been so consistent with that throughout the years. And sometimes I don't even know how you do it, just because it's a rough world. And I'm sure you weren't treated the best by society for your contributions and your sacrifices to actually be a whistleblower when everybody else was really quiet about it, and you've just been so consistent about that. And I know that alone has been really life-changing and really inspirational for other survivors to see, who might feel all that rage and anger and might want to act on it. You know, when you listen to you, it sort of takes you back to the foundations of humanity and what we actually need in this world, which is love and compassion. You know, you and others came from so much neglect and abandonment and hate and betrayal and just all these really, really negative emotions, including the ones that you take from it, the shame and the guilt that stay with survivors for so long and that eat them up, you know. And so I think the way that you've chosen is the way to combat this, by doing the opposite of what abusers do, by being the opposite, being the person that the small child that you once were wished that they had in their life, being the example. And like you say, the love that you are. You know, I think that's just such a beautiful message. And one of the things that I was hoping maybe you could talk about a little bit that you've brought up a couple times is triggers. That is a big thing that survivors deal with, especially around holidays, around these times of years, whether it's just seeing families celebrate, or whether it's seeing something such as, say, a Christmas tree that might bring back really traumatizing memories. And in the moment, you know, they're debilitated. Seeing some of this, you know, iconography that is out for the holidays that can remind them of a painful past. And I wanted to see, when you were being triggered just by everyday surroundings, going out and seeing Halloween decorations or things that could bring you back to your childhood, how did you cope with that and manage it? And what tips can you give for survivors who are dealing with an overload of that this time of year?
Conscious acknowledgement, you know, of the reality of those triggers, but also the ones that are unseen, that just cause the anxiety within and discomfort and depression, oftentimes depression, sleepless nights, you know, any of that aspect could happen just due to the calendar date itself, that we don't really maybe acknowledge the way that we should. But it's like our brains have their own timing mechanism in there. And as these calendar dates roll back around, they're very traumatic. One that was very difficult for me was solstice, because that was a ritualistic, horrible, traumatic time for me in that regard. So as solstice would roll around, I would, you know, feel the anxiety and stuff. It's like, I got to reframe this. So I spelled it SOUL, and I reframed the whole time. Solstice. Okay, this is mine. I'm reclaiming it. I'm reclaiming this time. And I found that because of doing that, all of a sudden the intuitions are heightened. The clairvoyance, the miracles unfolding all around, the beauty in nature, everything just becomes so much brighter when we reframe it. So everything can be reframed that way. Maybe the lights at Christmas that trigger, we need to take as an internal light and start shining from within, and realize that we can raise our own vibration and overcome the triggered vibration of the holiday. I was driving into town today in my little community, and there was a tent set up, and it said Christmas is traumatic for many. And it was a prayer tent. Mm-hmm. Not only was it a prayer tent, but they had food and clothes. They had everything right there. They were just offering to the community. And it was like, yes, people are doing that for each other now. They're reaching out with understanding to realize so many have been traumatized during holidays, that we need to start supporting each other through them. That's the greatest gift that we can give each other, is support through this time.
Oh my gosh, I love that. For so long, it's been just neglected. I know that the signage probably didn't say something specific like ritual abuse or SRA survivors. It left it more vague, but we can read between the lines if we know what's going on, that that's meant for people that are going through a lot, who have had those damaged pasts, who struggle this time of year. And I love that you saw that in a public space, because you don't really see that very much. You know, survivors struggle to even go walk into a church and be welcomed with open arms, which is really sad.
Yeah, it is. The churches are finally waking up to the reality of the extent of abuse. You know, back when I was a little child in Muskegon, Michigan, back in like around 1960, and already being trafficked and My father sold me into MK Ultra mind control after being granted immunity from prosecution after being caught with child pornography of me. It shows how long our justice system has been corrupted. It shows how long that all this has been going on. And the human trafficking that was going on back then was something I was part of. The blackmail tapes. We hear about the Diddy tapes and the Epstein list and everything like that. And this kind of blackmail has been going on my whole life, and people are finally seeing it now. But it's taken all this time for people to wake up, and it's like now as they wake up, they're realizing child sex trafficking has become one of the most lucrative businesses in the world. And that's because we didn't wrap our brains around it. We didn't wrap our minds around it. We weren't told in church how to reach out to each other and help each other and see the reality of what was going on. And instead, it was just viewed as something demonic, over there, when in fact, it's an evil that was being imposed on children for generations now. So I've been speaking out extensively all across the nation. People are ready for truth. There's safe houses opening outside the corrupted system to help survivors. And the people want to know, okay, how can we effectively help these survivors? They want the truth. They want the what we've been blessed with all along within. And because it is so simple of what having been made perfect, when we align with the divine, we can heal from within. The churches are finally opening their minds to embrace that they can help survivors heal by giving them a safe place. The safety is key. It's a number one thing to healing. It's like when my father's sexual abuse began of me in infancy, I was too young to know what he was doing was wrong, but my brain knew. And it shut down those neuron pathways around the trauma and repressed it into the subconscious. It's the mind's sane defense to trauma too horrible to comprehend. It's what our brains do. Like I said, we've been made perfect. We have this whole mechanism. Well, that we have little triggers that come along to open that back up so we consciously deal with it. And we need to start learning to do that. And that way we can move in a more natural harmony with our brains. But it takes safety first, because by the time Mark Phillips, intelligence insider Mark Phillips, came along and lifted Kelly and me out of the Washington, D.C. human trafficking swamp in 1988, I didn't know good people existed in the world. I'd had 30 years of my whole life saturated in abuse, torture, trauma, mind control, seeing the corruption being laid out, seeing how Child Protective Services was deliberately corrupted, how drug and human trafficking across open borders was funding a globalist slave society agenda, seeing all that, I didn't know that good people even existed in the world. My brain knew I was safe. That safety is what allowed the neuron pathways to open up, for those memories to start flashing, for me to start remembering the past that I'd been tortured to forget. So that amnesia that I had was absolute until I was able to trust and know that I was safe. And the only way that I knew is my brain told me. Our brains know. Our brains know when they're being violated further by adverse mental health. They know when a hypnotist goes into the subconscious mind that it's a violation. The brain knows it's a violation and will not heal. It will not open those neuron pathways in the brain. It won't allow for the proper firing to go on. Mind control shuts down neuron pathways. We need them opened back up. And safety opens them back up. So a safe place is key. It's essential. It's imperative. And the churches are finally realizing that. It's not about casting out demons. It's about giving children a safe place to heal so that they can heal from what we've been blessed with all along, just divinely from within, because of course we've been given that resiliency. You know, love is the most powerful force in the universe, and the strength of the human spirit is just so absolutely aligned with that divine. There's no limit to the healing that we can do. If we focus on the saving grace that we have within us, instead of constantly giving power to the devil and the Satan and the evil, you know, and giving that place, because, you know, energy flows where focus goes. If that's where our focus is, you know, we're feeding that energy. Let's go to the reality and line with that divine and accept that we have the victory within us. And more churches are finally embracing that. So I've been speaking at more churches, I think, than anything lately, because they're opening up safe houses for the children too. They're wanting to be able to effectively help them. So it's deeply encouraging time to have voice and to be respected for the healing information that Mark taught me. So I get to carry what he taught me forward, and it's such an honor to get to do it.
Yeah, you and your work that you're doing currently, they're all, you know, created through his legacy. And it's amazing that you're able to keep him alive through that and through the work that you guys did in the past, that more and more people are finding that, and it's reaching more people today than ever. He would be so proud of you, and so just grateful that, you know, you kept going despite all the hardships that you've been through. And especially, I can't even imagine how hard that was to lose him, you know, the love of your life. And that's another topic I wanted to ask you about, is loss. One of the biggest and hardest things that a survivor goes through when healing is confronting the family, which they believe is going to be there for them and they'll all heal together, to finding out that the family wants nothing to do with them when when the memories come back, and when the survivor decides to leave the toxic situation and get to safety, how you were talking about, so they can heal. And that loss, you know, you were saying this isn't just, you know, usually one person. This is generations of family that they walk away from, generations of traditions, generations of memories. And not all the memories are always bad with these families. And so they walk away from their entire life, and that loss can just be so horrible. And it's sort of the linchpin, or the carrot that's dangled to get them to go back, you know, because after they leave, they're so isolated. How did you deal with that loss that you've experienced over and over again? How have you been able to reframe that and cope with it, to keep going and to keep your frequency high, and to keep a good attitude, and to just keep going overall?
Well, understanding my family's situation was key to being able to understand why they wouldn't have, why they didn't accept me healing, you know, and why they rejected me and shut me out. My father, and, you know, threatened my life, to say the least. And it was absolutely horrific. And I wanted to help my brothers and sisters. Of course, I loved them, but they were not in the same safe space. They were still in their abuse space. And because they were in their abuse space, they couldn't receive the information. They couldn't even hear beyond the programming screaming in their ear. We cannot heal for other people. They have to heal. Every person has to heal from within themselves. It's all a personal journey, because ultimately, as we reclaim our free thought, if we reclaim that strength of spirit and align with the divine, it's a spiritual journey, and everyone's spiritual journey is individual. We all have to do it for ourselves. We cannot do it for someone else. So it's the same way, even with those we love the most. It's even that way with our own families. So I couldn't help my brothers and sisters. And I realized that the best thing I could do is to use my love for them as my motive to continue speaking out. So that became part of this huge motive of love to keep speaking out. And that it helps to have a direction for it. It's almost like transmuting the pain into a positive direction forward. It's the best thing we can do for them, and continue our healing path and live the love that we are, shine our light bright, and hope that they see that light and find their way forward too. That's the best thing we can do for all of them. In the meantime, get a dog. Go volunteer somewhere, be around others who will receive your love. Go to, adopt an animal, interact with horses. Horses are very telepathic and very soothing, very healing. Do something, focus in another direction, because it's important to continue to reach out instead of curl up inside. When Mark passed away, that was a different kind of grief to have to deal with. And I realized through the writing, the poetry, I knew that I was vulnerable at that time because I was so overwhelmed with grief, and there were a lot of people that knew I was vulnerable. So I needed to be strong. I needed to strengthen fast. And I decided right then that I would carry Mark's love with me and double my strength, double the size of my heart, instead of let my heart break in two. And that way I'd be able to carry our shared life's purpose forward and make a difference that way. So it becomes a conscious choice that's not just, yeah, I'll do this. It doesn't work that. It takes exercise of moving that forward and staying focused on it, of protecting yourself at a time of vulnerability from abusers. If someone's been abused through the holidays in a family situation, then find something else to do this holiday instead of go back into that situation and try to confront it and try to change minds, because it's their path. You're not going to be able to live that path for them. Stay on your own, do what you can for yourself, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in harm's way by being around abusive people. It's very important to protect ourselves during times of vulnerability. So that's what I did after Mark passed away. I made sure that that I protected myself in every way and grew stronger carrying his love forward. So I just continue to live the love I am and honor him with every breath I take. It's the best thing I can do. And as for my daughter Kelly, now there's a different way of coping. That was so hard to know that I never could protect her from MK Ultra abuses, to where she was abused in the White House as a little bitty toddler, and I couldn't stop it any more than I could protect myself. I had a hard time dealing with that. As I was healing, I told Mark, I can't live with myself after what I did under mind control. Couldn't even protect my own daughter. And he said, you're not responsible for what you were programmed to do under mind control. Your abusers are responsible, and they need to be held accountable for that. We need to see some justice in this country. There's too many abusers going free. But still, he said, but now that you're aware, you are responsible for all your actions going forward. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Responsibility, the ability to respond, the choice, the ability to make a decision, the ability to do all I could to protect her going forward. Well, as soon as that had all happened, and I was aligned with that divine within and just knew that we were going to make it through this curve, as soon as that happened, that's when Child Protective Services stepped in and took custody of her and took her away from me for the next 10 years. It was really, really difficult. The best thing I could do then, I found I was drowning in my own tears. I wasn't helping her. I couldn't do anything that way. So I had to turn that around somehow. And I used all my love for her, my concern for her, as my voice to speak out and start making a difference for her. I spoke before the Tennessee legislature in her name, and it was 1991, very early on. And I continued to speak out everywhere I could to positively impact her situation. In the meantime, we were separated, and she was fighting for everything she said she was able to make it through those years because of the year that she was with Mark and me, and she learned how to think for herself. she was able to say no when they were trying to counsel her wrong, tell her her past wasn't real. They told her her past wasn't real, and she said, your beliefs don't change reality. So I mean, she was constantly in there battling too. So we couldn't really talk with each other, but telepathically we were still connected. The mothers loved that love was still there. We were connected throughout the whole thing. So at this point, Kelly does not have abandonment issues because she never felt abandoned. She knew what I was doing. She said, how many other mothers would take on a whole global government for their child? So, I mean, it was a completely different dynamic that we were able to continue to stay connected on the telepathic vibrational life's purpose divine level that we always shared, that powerful love. So that carried us through. We were separated for many years after. It's been a heck of a journey, but at this point, we have had all obstacles removed from our path. We have had protection put in place, and we are happily together all the time now, sharing life and enjoying every bit of it. We don't live as, whoa, this should have happened. Look what happened to us. Woe is me. We're both the same mindset. We're both too busy embracing the moment today, living the love we are, getting out in nature, enjoying the animals, and sharing all the little things in life that we didn't get to share all those years. We're making up for lost time now. And the book reSOULutions, it was Kelly that took the photo. And it was our first joint venture together to be able to get this book out. She did the cover for Align with the Divine, which is going to be out in any day, and I'm so proud of her in everything. And instead of looking at life in a negative, we see with full awareness of our path. It's like looking through the filter of that reality to understand what's going on in the world today, to see that people are waking up, to see this great awakening is real, that the whole vibration of the planet is rising as a result. Vibrationally speaking, this is such an amazing time to be alive. So my voice is stronger than ever. I'm respected for my testimony being the same for over 35 years, for not being triggered, for having the methods Mark taught me to be able to share them with other people. And so my voice is amplified. And as it's amplified, Kelly's not beside me. She's behind me. She's with me, but she's not standing on a stage with me or holding a microphone, because as a survivor, she made her own choice. She would much rather be behind me saying, go mom, She would much rather be contributing to our own community in her ways, to be able to get out in nature and work with animals and live her life her way. So not all survivors need to be speaking out the way that I do. My own daughter's a perfect example of that. And yet we couldn't be more alike in some ways, but just like Mark and I were, we couldn't be more different in others. And those differences make for a beautiful, I think a more powerful movement forward when you have differences, because differences aren't a bad thing. There's something that we can all grow from and grow with, have a louder voice.
Yes. And thank you for touching on all those different ways that loss can affect somebody, and that's not just limited to survivors, but obviously this time of year, seeing families get together. Most survivors don't have a family that they're going home to celebrate with. They're very traumatized and isolated. And one of the other things I know that you just spoke about that you experienced that is definitely another epidemic in our country and all over the world, is the family court system ripping children away from innocent parents, and I'm really grateful that you touched on that, because there's a lot of parents also listening to this and then also just out there feeling very isolated. They're not with their children are with an abuser, and they are feeling helpless and can't do anything about it. And many of those mothers and fathers can't speak out because of court orders. And so your voice is really powerful to help show people that you can get through it, and you can still use that fuel for motivation and for inspiration each day with love. And then also, I think it's so wonderful that you and Kelly were reunited, and not only that, but that you guys have built such a blossoming, beautiful relationship together and are now collaborating on projects and figuring out ways that you can use your story together and put it out in the world in a really positive way to help people. And I hope that also gives those parents hope that no matter how long they're away from their children, whether it's, a month, 10 years, 20 years, that it's not too late, that you can still build a relationship, that you can still make up for lost time, and that you can still create a beautiful life together despite the losses and the hardships of being separated. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, and for kind of touching on all the different ways that loss affects this incredible community that's, very vulnerable and struggling a lot right now.
Yes, it's so many families have been torn apart. And I know how bad and corrupt this system is. And it's, you just keep raising that awareness and supporting each other. Understand that too many people have been affected and too many families torn apart. Families are under attack. Our humanity is under attack. Again, because these puppet masters fear the strength of the human spirit. And that it's nowhere stronger than in a family unit, the natural family unit, one that is able to be as it was intended to be. Access denied for reasons of national security is like a roadmap through the corrupted justice system. What Mark and I were able to accomplish, what doors we kicked down, what we were able to do, where the roots of corruption are planted. And hopefully, as more and more people read it, and as that awareness rises, then fewer people are going to be impacted by this corrupt system. Because right now, there's so many people opposing it. There's so many people aware of it that there's an effort to clean it up. But that effort is going to take far too long. Children can't wait. It's up to us to be able to make that difference outside the corrupted system. It's up to us to start cleaning up our justice system in our own communities. Get involved, get active, eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul, right there in your own community, and make the necessary differences. It's something we all have to do, because it's not only the children can't wait, but the parents who are separated from them. This is really, really hard, and it's a difficult time. I've got many poems that I've vented while Kelly was in custody that are in reSOUlutions. I've got a whole chapter that's dedicated to her and those poems. Aligned with the divine, I have many little stories of the telepathy that we shared, the connection that we shared, whether we had confirmation of it or not. We found out all these years later that what I was doing on one end, she was receiving on the other, and how that came about. So love is the most powerful force. I would encourage all parents who are separated from their child, whether the child's with abusers or in the corrupted system, it's the same thing. Keep beaming them that love, wrapping them in that strength. They know that you're there, and keep focused on where you can go in the future, because where we are right now today is temporary. We can get through it and keep going, because miracles happen in this life, and when we live the love we are, they unfold bigger and better than anything we ever can imagine. So keep holding the vision. And for people who aren't affected by that system in any way, realize that so many people are, and they need understanding, they need help, they need support, they need kindness during this time. It seems so many people get caught up in a different holiday mode. They get in a hurry and rush, and they push past each other. And really, we need to all slow down, take time to reconnect, breathe in the air, ground, get our feet on the ground, feel the earth beneath our feet, slow down, reach out and start genuinely caring for each other again. It's our time. It's our time to live the love we are and share it with each other.
Yes, it is. And another topic along those lines, we did an entire episode on this with Julia Engel on self-harm programs, just for the sake of this being an episode to help empower survivors. And I hope it reaches a lot of survivors and that they can take a lot of tips from this episode. I'll put the full episode in the show notes, but Cathy, for survivors just waking up or just finding this episode or just coming to terms with their past, there's a lot involved with programming, including the self-harm programs that can be activated through remembering and especially telling verbally what happened to them, to maybe somebody else or to a therapist. What ways can survivors stay grounded this time of year, especially when some of that might be triggered and activated just with it simply being this time of year?
It's really wise to take a break from any survivor groups that they might be involved in, you know, where they're all inner talking and everything, because they might trigger each other adversely. You know, kind of be aware of that, and stay strong in that kind of situation. And you know, just realize that all that the self-harm triggering and everything can happen as a result of speaking out online and then realizing, oh, wow, somebody just saw that. I wasn't supposed to say that. Somebody just saw it. We've got this online therapy going on, which I think is it's the wrongest thing. Talk about leading people outside themselves. But they'll, you know, tell a secret or something and not realize, because they haven't written it out, what the adverse effects of having spoke it. They have been told that if they ever tell that secret, so-and-so is going to die, this is going to happen, they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to die, they need to suicide, they need to, you know, these death programs can kick in just because someone has told a secret inadvertently online. Artificial intelligence therapy, what is that? But people are doing it, and they're telling their, you know, typing it all out there, and that's keeping it, it's not opening neuron pathways in the brain, it's keeping compartmentalization in place. Then they spew out that secret and bam, you know, it's a problem. So don't do any of that. Stay away from the online therapy, stay away from artificial intelligence therapy. I would advise everyone to stay away from any kind of therapy and survivor groups just through the holidays, and instead go within, write it out, vent any way you need to, get it on paper, open those neuron pathways in the brain, get out in nature, go have group therapy with the horses, go have group therapy with the dogs, you know, do something like that for a while. If you're really strong in who you are and you're already aligned with the divine within and you already have your rudder in place where you can effectively help survivors, then by all means, help anyone who is reaching out and encourage them to take time for themselves, to go within, to strengthen within, to align with the divine, live the love they are, get out in nature, be with animals, write, pick up that pen, vent, write out everything they need to say, and then add a solution to it, because adding that solution makes the brain fire in new ways, lifts you above that storm, lifts you out of that dark, gives you a bright path forward where you can see more. So add the solution, and I spell it SOUL, write that solution, and that will help to expand thinking further, open neuron pathways, and allow you to think above and beyond the self-harm program, because you're stronger than that program. You're the one who's in control now. You don't have to give in to that at all. The best way to do that is to remember who you are, why you're here, align with the divine, and refuse to comply with anything that has to do with self-harm, including telling yourself that you're stupid, you're dumb, you're this or you're that. You can't even say anything negative about yourself. Not even if it's a monthly cycle. You can't say anything bad about yourself. You're not allowed to. So make some rules on your emotions so your emotions don't rule you. And that way you're going to be able to diffuse the triggers and rise above any potential self-harm program.
Thank you so much for that. This is such an important topic because with so many survivors speaking out, it's an incredible time, but it's also really scary if they don't have tools to understand what can happen after they do that. And I think that's so wise about what you said with just being aware of what you're posting online, especially because I see that a lot too. And then the person will disappear for a while and say that they, something happened to them. They were very destabilized from it. And it's really sad, and luckily destabilization is on the more mild end of what can happen. I'm so grateful a lot of people are getting through that, but it can lead to so much worse, with what types of harm can be done on the self if they're expressing too much. And so I really appreciate your guidance on that because we really need to get that word out there to survivors and survivor helpers to help keep that groundedness whenever they're feeling expressive or feeling like they want to tell or share, because that is important that they do that. That's such a big part of the healing journey. However, there's, consequences depending on how fast they move through that. And like you said, if they're not writing it down first. And so one of the really interesting things that you mentioned that you've done in reSOUlutions, and I've seen a few other survivors that have done this as well, is the collages. I wanted to ask what, for you did poetry, which I think is really cool that you actually published this. A lot of people probably haven't seen that very artistic side of you with collages, with poetry. How did those things help your healing? And what other different ways could you recommend for survivors or people that help survivors, kind of a non-therapeutic way of being creative or healing? You've mentioned going out in nature and getting a dog, which are two other amazing ways that can provide love and healing for us, and just taking a breath of fresh air. But I wanted to see how has poetry and collages, how did that affect your healing, and are there any other ways that you could recommend for other survivors to sort of be able to get creative and to let these parts in their systems express these memories?
Yeah, well, the collages were really helpful because they allowed me to access my own subconscious mind. And it's good. Like I said, triggers don't have to be anything bad. They can be real good. They could give us insight into ourselves. And when we understand them and consciously acknowledge them, we diffuse them. They don't have to be an adverse thing. They can give us a lot of insight into ourselves. So the insight that they provided me, I wrote out the memory, in full detail, as in PTSD Time to Heal shows us how to do. I wrote out that memory, and then I still had to cope with it, and deal with it. So I vented in with those poems. So they helped me to reframe a lot of, and to take control back, to not allow someone to have a monarch trigger. Monarchs are beautiful. They're phenomenal. What amazing creatures. Someone else can't own that and drive your thoughts with them. They can't own a rainbow. They can't own a rose. They can't have these triggers. No one owns them. They're beautiful aspects of life. So reframe them, take them back, claim them for yourself any way you want to. Reframing them is a real important aspect of being able to do that. So there's so many different ways, creative ways that we can express. Someone might, rather than write a poem, they might write a note to an abuser and vent out that way, and then add a solution that is a viable one stemming from love. I wrote some poems that use codes, keys, and triggers to other people that I knew were programmed, like George Bush Jr. Like I wrote one to Roger Clinton, who was part of Wayne Cox's, occult. It's horrible, that aspect. But he was Bill Clinton's half brother, so I was able to take those triggers and wrap them around to, like if I could speak to him, I would say this to help him, to help him remember who he is and undo his what he's been through. And if they had that voice, if someone like George Bush Jr. could actually, heal to remember everything and speak about it, he could set so many people free. So I used that and I turned it around. So instead of just blaming, I used it for empowerment. So whether it's a poem or you write a letter, if you're grieving, what didn't you say to that person, then write that out. What would you like to say? What do you wish was different? What do you wish you could have done for them? Write all that out. There's so many different creative ways that we can do it. Draw, paint, use any artistic expression that you can that would vent that out, and something that you can give, something that you can share. There's so many different things that we can do for other people when we think beyond our own grief, look outside ourselves and expand our hearts and our minds to be able to reach out to other people. We can make a world of difference. And by doing that, we rise above our own grief and our own and lift out of our own darkness.
It's been so neat for me personally to see how art can help with trauma. Not being a survivor myself, I didn't grow up in this type of life that you did. I had just always learned that art was just a skill. It was something that, people that have talent do. And then if you're not talented, it's not really something that you do. It's not something that's encouraged unless you want to be an artist or you want to go to school and major in it. And I wish that this knowledge was for everybody, because since learning this, I've been trying in my own life to just do more creative things, to draw, to do a puzzle, to color, to just do something like artistic, because it really does, it helps you sort of get out of that day-to-day stress, even if you just work a 9 to 5 and you're stressed about it, or you're not sleeping, or you have a stressful family life. There's a lot of different ways that trauma affects the everyday person. I think being creative in whatever way is just so therapeutic for everybody. And I love that you and survivors are helping us remember that.
It helps exercise the brain in creative directions. It's like after I deprogrammed, I had to learn to think, and in that process of learning to think, I had to learn to visualize. Mark and I were restoring this house that we built out of a pile of rubble and pulled the vines off it, and I just saw a pile of rubble, and it was like, oh, this is so horrible. And Mark could visualize, and he said, no, we can do this and we can do this, and he could see what it could become, and what this house had become is just, wow, so magnificent as a result of that. But I learned to visualize in that process. And recently I had a room that I needed to redo for myself, and I didn't have an idea of what I could do because I don't have that kind of visualization. So I just started slow, and I thought, what do I want? I want plants. Oh my gosh, it's my plant room. The room is just full of light and full of plants. I've got plants everywhere. And I found something else in that process, that when you start, I didn't know I had a green thumb. I don't really, but the plants liked me after all, and they just blossomed, and I got all these blooms and everything just came to life. So sometimes maybe just go plant something and watch it grow. And to be able to do that is absolutely amazing. And to have your own room and make it come into being into such a peaceful place. That's my favorite room. It's where I should be doing my podcast from if the lighting was right. It was just because it's such a beautiful, peaceful place. And we can all create that for ourselves. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take anything but our own creativity and knowing what it is we want. It's like I wanted a plant. That's where it started. Wow. Now, all of a sudden, I've got this, this whole room. I had to learn to think of food. Mark exercised my brain that way. Said, what do you want for dinner? I didn't know, my brain went into a black hole. I wouldn't know what to do. So I listened to my body, and my body told me what it was craving. And I learned to listen to my body that way. So listening to my body and then feeding it accordingly made for my brain fire even better, because our brains need the nutrition and our bodies know what it needs. So I started listening to that, and I do that now, and I do that every day with my cooking. So I decide every day, what is it my body is needing, and how can I make that come about? That's its own kind of creativity. You almost have to get artistic with with food in that regard, but making it nutritious and making sure that it's nourishing our bodies, nourishes our brains, and keeps us in a much better mind space, and helps fight off any depression or anxiety, for the holidays too. Go cook something. Go bake something. Maybe that's where all those cookies came from.
That's also wonderful too, because I think, that's another thing we take for granted sometimes or just forget about, that you can really change a lot with your mood by your environment. Sometimes if we're in a space that doesn't feel good, or if we haven't, like you took the initiative and put plants and things that make you happy, sometimes if we're just in these bland environments that don't make us happy, it's not contributing to our journey of finding joy and healing. And I think feeding ourselves, being able to nurture yourself is something that is very uplifting. It makes you feel good, even if it doesn't always taste like the junk food or give you that dopamine rush right away. It helps contribute to your longevity and health. And I think it's really easy whenever you're depressed and sad to just go eat fast food every day, to eat, tons of cookies that are processed and not good for you, and to not sit there and be thoughtful with the ingredients and create it for yourself. And that's a big part of healing too, is creating an environment that feels good, that feels healthy, that feels radiant, that has plants, that has life, and even planting and gardening can be so healing. You're nurturing something other than yourself, and it gives you a reason to wake up every day, to go take care of this room of plants and to feed it water. It kind of gives like a purpose, even if it's small. That can be really uplifting and help somebody get out of bed that might just be, so depressed, and plants obviously are just so high frequency too. It's hard to be in a room of plants and to feel sad, even if you are. And so I really appreciate you contributing all that too. Those are all different ways that we can get creative with our health and with our environment. Those are all things that can help us feel safe and good within our bodies, and, can ultimately contribute to our longevity and our long-term health and healing. And so, Cathy, with more survivors waking up, that means that more non-survivors and kind of people in society that may not be too familiar with what you and others have went through are going to be coming in contact with survivors more and more and more. What ways can society help contribute to the health, safety, and well-being of survivors, especially during these really hard times of year? But what advice would you give to people who will be in contact with survivors and know that, or know people that may be going through a really hard time? How can we be more supportive of this community?
I think deep listening, daring to care, and understanding the magnitude of the reality of what goes on in our world. People have experienced things, such horrific, dark things. Good people don't want to wrap their brains around it. And it's like when I first started speaking out and people didn't want to believe, I had this amazing realization that people are so kind that they don't even want to wrap their brains around it. They don't even know that it exists. They don't even see it. But these days, since there are so many survivors, more and more people are seeing it. And it's like, how do they respond to it? Just with kindness, just love, just peace. Nothing dramatic. It doesn't have to be and not encouraging them to, speak on and on and on about it. Encourage them to do something fun instead, to live their life, because so many survivors forget to live their life. They're so wrapped up in the past. They need to pull their head out of their past and move into their future, and it's so much brighter when they do. So it's one of the nicest things we can do for each other is maybe take a walk, maybe, just something simple, go to lunch, anything that is a little bit different path than what they've been focused on, give them something else to look at. Maybe go visit a farm.
Yes, and the listening, that is such a big thing. It can be hard to hear what you and others have gone through, but it's harder to have gone through it than for us to sit here and listen to it. And I think we really need to be reminded of that. We can all heal together. Some of these conversations, no matter how hard they are, we learn a lot through the journey of what a survivor has gone through and what they've overcome. And for me, I always just feel so awe-inspired. I don't feel traumatized listening to these stories. I just feel, oh my gosh, we're capable of this. Humans are capable of that. I never learned that. Like, look what we can do. We can survive impossible odds. We can completely heal our body. We have these incredible intuitive and psychic gifts that all of us have inside to some degree that we can use. We can be creative. We can write. I mean, it's like we learn so much through the journey of survivors. And I think if we focus on that too, people who are non-survivors, instead of the trauma, it can give us an opportunity too to learn how to heal ourselves and how to contribute positively to the world, and to just be really in awe of what the human body is capable of surviving and overcoming and healing, and you and others, Cathy, are just such prime examples of that. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart just for being such a beacon, 35 plus years. I mean, that is just incredible. 1 year going through speaking out publicly can feel like a battlefield for people.
Yeah.
And we have the internet now and we're able to connect with like-minded people. Despite now there's more invitation for bullies and for people to be mean, there's also an opportunity now for us to create communities and to find like-minded people and get support online, which is really refreshing. But I just want to thank you for your just endless work. You've never stopped. You've never taken time off. You've never quit. And that's such an accomplishment when you've gone through so much already. And then you've been battered and treated so cruelly by society. But now you're in this place where I feel like you're being more and more embraced than you ever have. And people are supporting you. And I don't know if you want to talk about that journey a little bit, just to give people hope who are thinking about speaking out and who are really afraid, just kind of what you've experienced and maybe some hope that you can give people who want to use their voice, but are just scared of the implications of, oh my gosh, are people going to hate me? Are they going to bully me? You're somebody who's overcome all of that. And I love just how you combat all the bad online with your pure heart and your love. And I think that can be really hopeful for people.
Oh, I appreciate that. That the speaking out, I'm so fortunate to have healed from within right from the get-go, so that it didn't matter if people validated me or not. It didn't matter what they said to me. I was strong in who I am. I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. I know why I'm here. And I needed to give voice to my daughter. I needed to give voice to the other survivors. And I think that's a huge motivation for a lot of survivors, is to stop the abuse, to be able to help other children, and they need to make sure that they're healed fully first before reaching out to others, before speaking out. But when they speak out, it should always be with the purpose of being able to effectively help others, rather than to expect a reaction for what you've been through. It's more of people facing that reality in order to stop the abuse and to realize that we have a corrupt justice system, that we have a corrupt child protective services, that Satanism has been allowed to go on even in the churches, that just a normal church, and the occultism that goes on there. People need to open their eyes to the reality in all walks of life and see where they can make that difference best. Is it speaking before the legislature? Is it speaking before the county commission? Is it speaking before the school board? Is it, speaking before the church? Wherever it is, everybody, all survivors need to find their own direction, see if they need to speak out or just simply take action quietly, like my daughter does. She enjoys just taking the action and lets me do the speaking. So, that we all choose our own way of making an effective difference, but whatever we choose to do it in a giving manner, don't expect to be receiving anything from anyone, because you won't. That's the biggest part. And also, when people are speaking out and they feel like the energy is so negative, and they get exhausted from the negative energy. I hear people talk about that. And it's like, well, then exude your love, just exude. If you exude, you're not taking on other people's energy. You're not taking on the negative they might be throwing your way. So just keep living love, exude that love. You don't have to take on their path, because that's all it is their life's path, and they need to, take a further journey down it, and learn a little bit more. So allow for that to happen, and just be strong in who you are. So no matter what we do, that's what we, if we're going to speak out, do it because there's a motive, a reason, and a purpose behind it, not because you feel like you're obligated to. It's got to be for good reason.
That was really good advice. That's one of both of those things, the fear of actually doing it, and then doing it and just taking on all that negative energy. Some people that do get the courage to speak out just stop, because they're like, all right, I can't take all this on. And that was really, really good advice to combat that. That way they can keep going, because it is important that survivors keep going. If they make that decision and they're safe to do it in any type of way, whether it's behind the scenes at a local church or even online doing podcasts with tons of, viewers like what you do, it is important that we continue this journey, just because this is still a problem that's happening today, and we still do need to fight for it. The fight's not over yet. And so I just commend you for figuring all that out, with such little resources, in a sense, especially when you first started speaking out, before the internet was really big and before survivors were accessible to network with, and to realize that you're not alone in this journey. You were really alone in a lot of ways doing this, with the help of Mark, of course, so you weren't totally alone. But, just seeing what you've overcome, I hope that gives a lot of people hope that are thinking about taking that same path and speaking out in some way, or doing something publicly, which is an incredible, part of a survivor's journey, in any type of way that they choose to do that. And Cathy, you're such a beacon of light. I'm so honored to have you on, and I can't wait to have you on again. But before we wrap up, did you have any other advice, guidance, words to say to survivors going through the holidays this year, and just struggling or trying to get through it?
Yeah, to just reframe it, take the time, step back. And it's fine to be by yourself. It's fine just to be out in nature. It's okay to not participate in someone else's tradition. This is your time. It's time for yourself. It's time to align with the divine within, find that inner peace, that inner strength, live your love, and see what you can give. What can you give? Where can you make an impact? It might be in your own little community. There might be something you can give to someone that's going to make a difference. Because sometimes when we give, we give more to ourselves than others. It's a real strong way to be. Above all, I encourage everyone to align with the divine within and start living your life. Embrace the miracles that are unfolding all around us, because they do every day. There's a synchronicity and a rhythm to life. There's a flow. There's so much beauty that's unfolding around us. When we open our eyes to it and embrace it, we just need to remember to open our eyes and look at it and realize that we live in a world filled with miracles and possibility. There are no limits to what we can accomplish when we live the love we are.
And you're an example that we can look at in the physical and see that is the reality that we live in. Thank you so much, Cathy. It's such an honor to have you on. And before we wrap up, remind people where they can get your books, and then also, if you're on social media, where people can follow you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, they can get my books at trance-formation.com, TRANCE-formation.com. All my books are on Audible. I read them myself, and that way it preserves the integrity of information. So, and people can find them on Amazon. But above all, they're secured on my website at trance-formation.com. And you can find me on social media. I'm at Real Cathy O'Brien on X. I'm on Locals right there. I've got my locals. I'm at a Transformation of America on locals, and you can just go to the bottom of my website and join there. That's a nice place to have voice, and where I usually post everything first. I've got a lot of blogs that I post and encourage survivors on how to cope today, and, you know, let people know what in the world is going on and what they can do to rise above the imposed trauma, and keep living life the way it's intended to be lived. So all that's on my website at trance-formation.com. And you can find me on X and locals and other social media at Real Cathy O'Brien.
Thank you so much, Cathy. You're an absolute joy. You're somebody that just over the years, I can't even imagine how many lives you've touched. You know, I know just from my own experience, I've met hundreds of people, you know, and dozens have come on this podcast and talked about you, but the amount of emails that I've gotten with people referencing your work, the amount of testimony, you know, what you've done is just, it's as miraculous as your survival. And, you know, you'll always have a special place in my heart and in the heart of this community. You're such a beacon of hope for people, a beacon of light, you know, and ultimately you're somebody that helps keep people going. And your work is just so important. It's crucial in laying out those foundations of writing memories down, writing thoughts down, PTSD, Time to Heal, reSOUlutions, your new book, Align with the Divine, you know, these tools that you're creating for us now and that you've created in the past, they're going to live on for generations to come and help continue healing this, you know, really, really damaged community that really needs these tools to help get them through, and hopefully can help set other generations of survivors free. So thank you with all my heart. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful that you came on today.
Thank you. I love you too.